And this year we thought we would deal with social responsibility. But before that serious subject gets underway, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell you something you don't know about them that you can't read in their bio.
I'm Kristen Hopkins. I go to Aspen High School, and I suppose an interesting fact is that my half-brother and I were born on the same day, 13 years apart.
I'm Matthew Capodicaza. I'm from Fordham Primary Stages. And an interesting fact about me is that I'm getting married.
Ooh. Really? When?
In August.
I'm Lynn too. I'm from Northwestern University, and I can't eat fancy food because they give me dizziness.
My name's Kathy Chalfant. I'm an actor from New York, and I'm an enormous fan of Willie Nelson.
My name is David Jacoby. I'm from UC San Diego, and when I was 19, I worked ring crew for a independent wrestling league.
My name is Lydia Blaisdell. I go to the Mishner Center at UT Austin, and my brother is a professional volleyball player.
Well, I'm not going to tell you too much about me, but I will say one thing. Most of you don't know I was on the Andrea Doria when it sank at sea. So I'm a survivor, and so is everybody in the theater a survivor. Now, we're going to talk about social responsibility and the role of the storyteller. And since we have a Kathleen Chalfant here, who was in the seminal production, perhaps one of the most important productions in the last 50 years or so, that, called Angels in America, I'm going to ask Kathleen to tell you a little bit about that play and why it was significant at the time, and then we're going to hear from our writers.
It was a great privilege to be involved with the making of Angels in America almost from the beginning. The commission for Angels in America, played by Tony Kushner, called Fantasia. Oh God, it has a wonderful subtitle. A Gay Fantasia on American Themes, exactly. And that's a perfect description of the play. From the beginning, from the first reading that anybody ever had of the first reading of the play, we knew it was an important and beautiful work of art, and it had the gift, which is sometimes the gift and sometimes the curse of beauty, because Tony writes beautifully. And sometimes when you're talking about difficult things, that's a very good thing because it seduces the audience. And they don't understand quite how fierce and subversive and groundbreaking the things they're hearing are. We had the experience so often, particularly when the play got to Broadway, because in smaller theaters, sometimes it was a kind of self-selecting group and people knew what they were coming to see. But on Broadway, we were talking earlier in the afternoon, Broadway now is a kind of vaguely highbrow theme park. And people just go. If the thing is on Broadway, people go to it and have sort of vaguely know that it's something you're supposed to see, but don't know much more about it. And so we had the experience of, on the days when you did the whole play, which was 7 hours of play, to have many, many, many members of the audience think something for 7 hours and feel something for 7 hours that they'd never felt before. And even if they only thought it and felt it for 7 hours and 5 minutes, it must change your mind. And it was a great experience of the power of art to change people, to make people think different things. It provided a safe place. I played many parts in Angels in America, but one of my main parts was the Mormon mother. And there aren't, except now, you know, Mormons on Broadway, but there aren't so many plays about Mormons. And the Book of Mormon actually deals with many of the same themes as Angels in America. But when we were in New York, I believe in my heart that every single gay Mormon man in America came to see the play, and they'd wait afterward to see me, and they would say to me, "You are just like my mother." And I didn't know, that seemed to be a sort of double-edged sword. And I can't tell you how thrilling it was to be part of something that changed the American theater, because not only the subject of the play was groundbreaking at the time, and it also talked a lot about politics and changing politics, because it was written between 1988 and 1991, and so it was just the end of the Soviet Union, and for many of us who were members of the left, it was a very difficult time, because people kept saying that the left was over. And the play talks about whether that was true too. But also formally, the play was very important, so that this generation, there are no plays written in America, I would venture to say, since 1992, that have not in one way or another been affected by Angels in America. So it had a huge impact on its art form as well.
Well, I thank you, and you all have probably seen Kathleen also on television. She did in the series, The Affair, and she has done many, many, many things on Broadway and off-Broadway, and it is a great gift to have her here with us. Now we're going to hear...
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
We're in which...
We'll take audience questions and comments shortly. But before that, I want to begin with Brooklyn and move down and ask each one of them, what play in the canon do they feel really has had an effect on the audience or has shown a social responsibility in some way? Are you ready for that? Would you like to start or go for it?
I went to the read-through last weekend, and I have to say the one, Battle on Coney Island, had a major effect on, I feel like, everyone in the room. It was really funny. The dialogue was very clever, and I think we all really enjoyed it.
Okay. Go ahead. Do you want to respond to that? Would you like to respond?
I just said thank you.
This is one of the, you're talking about one of the plays, the Take 10 plays?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So now that gives you a real reason to come and see them. But moving on, perhaps in the canon, Matthew, what would you talk about?
I'm really interested in a play called Wojciech, which is a 19th century German play by a man named Georg Buchner, who died very young and didn't write very many plays. But and this play is interesting because he actually didn't finish it when he died, or so we believe. So there's no definitive order that the scenes are in. So it's kind of an endlessly adaptable play. Loosely inspired by real events. It's about a young soldier who is driven mad by a lot of different things that are going on in his world, and he eventually murders his lover. But it's kind of a play that it can be about a lot of things and whatever anybody kind of wants it to be about within reason. At any given moment, I've seen it as a reflection of wartime struggles and post-traumatic stress disorder. I've seen it. I've heard or read of different productions that use all kinds of different approaches to it. But I think it still stands up, and it's a very interesting play.
Go ahead, next.
Because I've been spending my life in Beijing, so I mostly see all those plays that are happening in China. So I can introduce a little this avant-garde theater started in Beijing from 1993, I think, and this group of this particular artist and his actors have been putting on a lot of avant-garde plays in Beijing and during all these years. Maybe it's something that everyone's kind of have some kind of knowing is that we cannot really put on plays that are so like bold or because there's censorship. And so I went to this particular play to, like, a large part of this play is like fun, and we have like jokes, but I remember this particular part is the actor is giving a monologue, a long monologue about how pathetic his life is. Like, I step on a whale lid and the lid just explodes, and so I just got, and my mom picked me up from the prison, and it's all hilarious, but he's adding up all the social events that we are going through into and making them into jokes. So like I feel like that's what we are doing. Like generally, like we are laughing at all of those ridiculous and pathetic things that are happening in our society, and we are presenting them as jokes. And maybe it's because there's not that much we can do, so like I guess like laughing about them is like the thing that we can do. So
I would say Waiting for Lefty by Clifford Odets. I come from a union family, so I'm aware that Teamsters and labor unions, people that work for them, it's a common misconception. You get the idea of being lazy and having a lot of breaks, but for every hour you spend working, you probably spend about 3 hours fighting to make sure that your rights aren't taken away. And Waiting for Lefty really captured that. So it was overt with its demand to call upon an ill and ask for social progress. If you look at the state of especially taxi drivers and also, for instance, super shuttle drivers, you'll find that Waiting for Lefty failed, which is sad, but that's the nature of things.
It's okay. Sorry. I'm just gonna go ahead and go with Paula Vogel's How I Learned to Drive. I think that play is a real turning point in the American theater for female writers, sort of across the board. And I think it winning the Pulitzer also really helped. And I think it's not exactly an overtly political play, but I think who is the protagonist of a play and like what is covered. It's a play about incest. Can really change how we think about social issues and can sort of gently open minds in like a subtler way.
So everyone, what is the role of the storyteller? You all are storytellers. What do you see is the role, and what do you feel your role will be? Now, we don't know where you're going to go next, but you said you might do, Kirsten is from Aspen High School, and you said you might move into film, but I'm going to start at the other end and come forward and talk about what you think the role of the writer in theater today is. Is there a role, and what do you want your role to be?
That's the question I ask myself every night. I think for me, the role of a storyteller and the role of a playwright in like this overly saturated, mediatized world that we now live in, is really to entertain, but also to provide sort of a space in a room over time to connect to other people, and whether that's the actors, whether it's the audience, whether it's a really participatory show, I think like all of those are methods that I want to explore for just communicating with other humans better.
I guess for me, the role of the playwright is just to tell the story. And by story, I mean like the primal story. I think it was Joseph Campbell who said it, something about if the world is a giant computer, civilization is the software, and the story or the myth is the hardware. And you'd think it was the other way around, but civilization, the society keeps changing, but we're still telling the Greek stories. We're still telling really very old stories. It's the reason why playwrights are the only profession where we lose jobs to dead people. So, I mean, I think that we react. We provide a mirror. I think that I wish we can get it out a little quicker. I wish we can put up plays that in a couple of weeks and they can be even more current than they are now. I wish Angels in America came out 2 weeks after the idea came up. I wish it came out much earlier than it did. But I think we just offer kind of just, here's what we see, here's what is around us, and here's how we're telling the story this time. And hopefully that brings about change. I think change is fine, but I think writing plays to enact social change, I think it can only be done by accident.
I'm going to, Kathleen, do you want to answer the question, or I have another one for you, but it's up to you.
I don't know, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to come back to you. We're going to move down this way, and then I'm going to come back because I have something to ask you about the writing of plays.
I think I really like to think about when I start writing a play. I start from a question. Like, the play really starts from a question about, like, it could be a big question about like why we're here, what we're doing, or very specific question like, why is that thing happening to that person? And I think in the past, I used to feel I should provide an answer for all of those questions in my writing when I'm telling the story, but now I kind of give up on that thought instead and replace it with like, I bring up this question and I put it out there, but I don't expect myself coming up with a perfect answer or anyone coming up with a perfect answer. Maybe I'm not entirely optimistic about like all the questions can be answered, like all the problems can be solved. I think I'm definitely not thinking like a lot of problems can be solved at this point, but I think it's definitely the responsibility of theater or other kind of media or art to at least bring up the question. At least it can attract people to pay attention on that particular thing. I think that's something that we can do, yeah, even if we cannot really provide an answer or a method to solve that.
Thank you. Yeah, kind of jumping off that, I think it's very easy to not pay attention to things and outside of yourself, and it's very easy to, and tempting even, to kind of descend into the default state of thinking, in your own head. And I think the storyteller has the opportunity to kind of work against that and to kind of force, in writing things, you kind of have to force yourself to pay attention. And that's sounds very simple, but I think for me anyway, it's been very hard. And it should be hard because it's the act of empathy, which is essential in storytelling for me anyway. And when things around you go unnoticed, they can become invisible, and that can be a culture, that can be a person, that can be just the thoughts and wants of somebody else. And the storyteller has the opportunity to make the invisible visible, if only for a short little while.
I believe the role of the storyteller is really to make a statement, whether it be a social commentary or just a statement about yourself to connect with other people. I think it was C.S. Lewis who said that art is unnecessary because it has no survival value, but rather it gives value to survival.
What a beautiful way to end that. I was speaking with Kathleen earlier about this role of storyteller and social responsibility, and why we are seeing more plays coming from England that are trying to deal with current events than we do here. And Kathleen, do you want to comment a bit about that?
I think the operative word here is seeing them. I read a lot of new plays and all, and it isn't that there is any dearth of political writing in America by American writers. It is that there is a kind of failure of courage on the part of producers. So that, and there's a kind of pervasive Anglophilia in the American theater, the notion that if Brits have said it, then it must be better, because they're smarter and have a better accent. I just was in London, and there is an extraordinary ad campaign for Las Vegas, which says, "Go where your accent is an aphrodisiac." I thought, yeah. So that might be said of the American theater. And it's very distressing. I have over the course of my life done a fair amount of actual rabble-rousing on my own, and then being in political plays that have had meant to be rabble-rousing. And more often than not, the critical response to them has been, "Oh, well, we already know that." And my answer was, well, if we already know that, how come the problem isn't solved? It still seems to be going on. So there is it's a peculiar kind of, a kind of form of anti-intellectualism in an odd way in the American theater, as though it's a bad thing to bring up, as though it's sinful somehow to talk about politics or social problems, or that somehow it's not essentially dramatic. And that's peculiar to me, because the theater is a political act in itself. It happens in a community. We're all there at the same time, and we're all the same size, in the same room, during the same time, doing the same thing, trying to come to understand or feel. Laughing together is a political act, in a way. So it makes me sad, and I know that many writers, American writers, who are discouraged from writing on political issues and social issues, because it seems to be a waste of time, since, as you say, no one's going to see it.
In asking you all, since you all have decided, or most of you have decided to be writers, why have you decided to take on this profession? And then I'm going to turn it over for questions. Why have you decided this medium?
Mine's pretty easy. I started out as an actress, and I would try and find monologues that didn't make me throw the book across the room, and I couldn't.
For me, I mean, it's a two-part. I guess for the firstly, it's my ideal form of communication. It's the best way to get my things out there, not just in writing, but also in performance and using different elements. And I've had a lot of jobs, and I'm not really great at any of them.
My answer is, I feel like I'm quoting from my personal statement to apply this program, is to escape from the real life. I kind of need an exit out of it.
Yeah, for me, it's just the best way I've seen to be able to connect with another human being in a room. Also because I'm also very bad at everything else I've tried to do.
I'm sure that's not true.
I'm not a very loud person, so I find writing to be a great platform for me to communicate with other people in the way that I want to be seen.
So we have a few more minutes, and I'm going to ask each one of these writers to say 1 minute about their play, because we are getting to meet them before their huge successes, I'm sure. So.
My play is called Collect Call, and it's about this husband who gets a final opportunity to have a conversation with his wife who's just passed away. And I just wanted to make it about what you would say to someone if it was the last thing you knew you would be able to say to them.
My play is called Of Our Own. It's about a man and a woman who reconnect after some years apart, and we discover in the play that the man is mentally ill and is homeless, and they have a moment to reconnect.
My play is called Time Difference. I feel like time difference is a metaphor for all the difference that, like the Chinese culture and American culture, between the Chinese culture and American culture. And it's about this long distance relationship between these two young people. But I feel I can talk about something more.
My play is The Battle of Coney Island. It's about Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison in heaven, dealing with the aftermath of the death of an elephant that Thomas Edison famously executed on a Coney Island boardwalk. It's about legacy. It's about forgiveness and thinking about the things you've done and finding out maybe if it was worth it or not.
And?
My play is called Donna's First Brazilian, and it's about a divorcee who goes for her first pubic wax.
And now I'd like to ask to wrap up for this session, Kathleen, would you speak about one play that you have been in that you felt was particularly significant that we're sorry we all didn't get to see?
There have been a number of them. One play that I begged to be allowed to be in was a play called Guantanamo, Honor Bound to Defend Freedom, which was a play from the Tricycle Theatre in England about the British Guantanamo detainees and therefore about the prison in Guantanamo. And it was a play made from real testimony, and there's no way to say this. Corin Redgrave, who recently died, was a friend of mine and had a great deal to do with freeing the British detainees, who in fact were for the most part freed from Guantanamo because they seem to have been wrongly and sort of weirdly rounded up. But and on the very last performance of that play, there was a part. There was a part. The opening speech and the closing speech were done sometimes by famous people, and the famous person who came to do it on the closing performance was Bishop Tutu. And then there was a question and answer thing afterward, and he said to the audience, you all know where I came from. Please don't let this happen here. And it was devastating. It was an extraordinary experience because I saw the play in London, and in London it had the effect of galvanizing public opinion because there was something to do. And doing the play in America was devastating for the audiences because everybody felt that there was nothing to be done, and we had to acknowledge the fact that we'd done this thing, and this was before the photographs came out and everything. It was a devastating experience, and I somehow feel if everybody in the country had seen it, it might have made a difference earlier.
Well, with that, we're going to say thank you to this panel and say how special you all were. And now, I'd like to move on and see if there are any questions in the audience for them before we change to the next group. Anyone want to ask anybody? Good. Wait, a microphone's coming. Andrew, welcome. Please come up. He's finally got here. He loves flying into Aspen. It's always, it always is a problem. Go ahead.
With your experience of being so motivated to make a difference through the acting in the plays, did you get any sense in this country of what works? I mean, obviously you mentioned the Angels in America, but is there any approach that makes it more palatable to be addressed when you're...
The plays, it has been my experience that if the play's really, really good and really, really, really well done, it works. You have to get past the sort of resistance on the part of the people who are going to put it on. But if the play is really good, then people listen.
Don't be shy. Oh, good.
What is a dream role for you? That a role that you always wish you could have played, but you never could based on race or gender or age?
It's an interesting thing about race and gender and age. I am a middle-aged, well, I'm not middle-aged anymore. I don't know anybody who's 140 years old, but so,
Except for me.
a not young, middle-class, white woman. I am actually invisible in the culture. So I have been able to play everything. I've played men. I've played almost every possible kind of European person you could play. I was in Venus, and so I played African American characters. I'm invisible, which is extraordinary because so it means that I've actually been very lucky to be able to play all kinds of people. I'm now too old to play lots of parts I didn't get to play. And I feel strongly about that, about age. There are plays like Hedda Gabler, which just don't make sense if the person playing the part is 40 or, God knows, 70. Because if you've gotten to be 40 years old in that society and not married, you're fine. It's not going to be a problem. So that's a play about being 30. And that's important. And also there are all the plays of Chekhov are lost to me now because all of the women, except maybe the Seagull, but otherwise all of those women have to be within shouting distance of being fertile and of having had children. So that's it's been, I've watched parts go away in that way, but I have had this very fortunate life in the theater because I'm invisible.
Hardly, but moving. Hardly, but any other questions from the audience? Is there one raising their hand back there? There's one over here.
Do you think the past couple of years, talking about social responsibility, do you see like trends changing? Everybody's going for the, I hate to say this, but the Disney, fast money versus taking on the questionable challenges like plays that actually have a purpose and message?
Well, it depends on where you're talking about. Certainly in the commercial theater, there just isn't very much new American writing of any kind, a non-musical new American writing on Broadway. There's a little bit, and what there is, it's hard even for any straight play to run at all. We were talking about it around the table, all of us, this morning, the writers. It's a scary time. And it's a time when people pull in, kind of pull in their horns a little bit because the problems to be addressed seem so enormous. And I think that that's a trend in some way in the whole culture, so that people are writing smaller things, or that thing about think globally but act locally, and people are acting locally, artistically. I think one hopeful sign for me is that there's lots more writing by women than there was. All the new writing gets done at the not-for-profit level in New York and in the regions, and that's a good thing. because it gets its work done.
One more question, two more questions, three more questions. Oh, we're loosening up. This is great. Good. We'll try them all because then you can keep them.
I was curious if, as playwrights, you have experimented with any other writing forms, poetry or novellas or any of those that you particularly liked, and if they've influenced your own screenwriting in any ways.
We'll start. Yes?
Yeah. I write fiction too, and I think it's kind of become a given that in today's theatrical world, playwrights often have to write for TV and film to make a living. So I've also dabbled in that as well.
Yeah, I write fictions, novels, screenplays, and I totally feel that different media is more good at telling different stories, and I feel like I can put different characters of mine into different forms.
Before playwriting, I did a lot of short fiction and creating comic books with my friends who were more visually, artistically talented than I was. So that's what we worked on.
I also try to write movies.
What? Go ahead. Yes.
So I feel like one of the issues that's difficult with theater is obviously it has a difficulty scaling, and as we see more of the Darien theater move to smaller venues, the reproduction of that at scale is difficult. And so one, I guess, inherently that brings up the question as a playwright of, if you want your message to be heard, do you have to go to another medium to do it, or is there something unique about the theater that allows you, or how do you deal with the uniqueness of the theater to engage that topic in a particular way that you don't think the mass reproduction of other mediums would allow? Does that make sense? Sorry.
Anyone want to tackle that?
It's a hard question right now. I think not as a writer, because it's easier for me as a performer, but the theater is no longer a popular medium. But it is difficult to eradicate, since it seems to survive. Year after year after year after year, everybody's always talking about how it's going to go away, and it doesn't. So there seems to be something essential about it. And I've been in a couple of plays that people years later come and talk about, and there's something about the idea that every performance in the theater, the only record, the real record of performances in the theater are in the minds of the people who have seen them. And it's extraordinary to me that 15 or 20 years later people should come and say they saw this play and remembered it. But people do. When the theater gets inside you, I think perhaps it gets inside you more completely than some other media, because you have to pay more attention, and you're part of the event. The audience is part of the event. The thing isn't made until it's received, until it's this thing that is the thing you make, the thing between here and there. It's this thing.
One over here, and then I think that'll have to be our last one. If you could wait for the mic, please. Then thank you, Crystal, for doing that.
Thanks. So, Kathleen, you mentioned that there's a sense that now that things are so overwhelming that we've culturally kind of edited out exploring things. And I'm wondering, are things so different now historically that they have been from the past? Is this kind of dynamic of people not pursuing things from a place of overwhelm different than it's been in the past?
I don't know. I can talk personally. We were also talking this morning about it. I've never had any trouble knowing where to sign up before. And And I think that for me, I was born in 1945, just at the end of the Second World War, and grew all my intellectual and political development happened in a world divided ideologically, not tribally or religiously. Basically divided, it was both the upside and the downside of the Enlightenment. And the tool that you used to investigate it was reason, not to say that people weren't entirely irrational about these rational positions, but still. For people on the left, the fall of the Soviet Union in 1989 was a huge watershed, and it shouldn't necessarily have been, because it wasn't the end of socialism, it just was the end of a badly run country. Whose economy was, hadn't been working so well. But in fact, the effect of it was the end of socialism as a respectable social solution. And I think that that was somehow replaced by some combination of something called freedom and free market capitalism, which were conflated as though they were the same thing, and somehow a moral system, rather. And it's been confusing how to organize the world. And we've now been involved in a whole bunch of wars that may or may not have been about anything, but probably were about oil, which has now been shown to be nonsense because it doesn't cost anything in any way. It's, the oil thing. And so then you take up an anti-war position and find yourself sometimes defending religious ideology that shows all the worst parts of the three Abrahamic religions, which are all actually the same religion and all go wrong in exactly the same way. So at the moment, one crowd of people seem to be doing it more than others, but it depends on where you look. So it's hard to know. What do you do as a woman? What do you do as a woman when you have to figure out a political position, one whole side of which is a deeply patriarchal and anti-woman atteggiamento to the world. It's a very, very complicated. If it were just about money and politics and the greatest good for the greatest number, that somehow now I remember that world as being it was clear. It was clear, you knew what to do. And I'm not at all sure that it's not a cop-out either for me. Because, I'm comfortable, no longer middle-aged, privileged, white American woman. So at some point, if I do nothing, the status quo is working for me. And so it's very difficult to figure out. I've always believed that it's more important to be effective than to be right. But my political allies for my whole life think that that's, for the most part, think that that's a position, a copping out position. I don't know.
Well, that leaves us with a lot to think about. And I would like to change panels and see where we go. So thank you all on this panel, and we'll move on to the other playwright. Thank you. Are you leaving us? Come back. Oh, good. Okay, well, we're going to wait. Okay, good. Hurry up. Hurry. I'd like to welcome you all to a panel discussion at the Aspen Institute, and the Theater Masters is again thankful to be invited back. With us today are playwrights who have won our playwriting competition, and we are pleased that Andrew Leynse is with us as well, who is the artistic director of Primary Stages in New York and the national advisor for our program. And I've asked everyone to please tell you something about themselves that you wouldn't know by reading their bio. So I'm going to start with Brooklyn, and then I'm going to end up with Andrew, who doesn't even know that question yet. Okay, go for it, Brooklyn. And where you're from, please.
I'm Brooklyn. I'm from Basalt High School, and I am a major science fiction fan.
I'm Philip House. I'm from Yale University, the School of Drama, and I can be driven to weeping by really lush, romantic musical theater.
Good for you.
I am Paula Vesala. I'm from UCLA, and I have the same astrological map as Edith Piaf.
Yes. Thanks for helping. I'm Kathy Chalfin. I'm an actor. I said this before. I'm going to say it again because it bears repeating. I'm a huge Willie Nelson fan.
My name is Sean David Demers. I am from the University of Iowa, and I have an alter ego by the name of Barnaby Wild, who does guitar tab of the entire catalog of REM.
I'm Chaz Libretto. I'm from Columbia University. And I have two cats who are sisters, and their names are Shrimp and White Wine.
And I guess I have to add to this. Well, I'll follow Philip's cue, and I found myself. I'm Andrew Leynse, and I'm the artistic director of Primary Stages in New York City, also an artistic advisor to theater masters. And I found myself weeping to a cheesy movie on the plane today. So.
Well, we have to know what the movie was, don't we? Do you remember the name?
I can't. Well, yes, it'll come to me. It was the one about. Oh my goodness, my life is a blur. But it was about this French chef set in. It just recently came out, and about this Indian chef who gets the 100 feet. What is it? 100 yards. Yes, it's quite charming.
Now moving really into something totally different, Andrew, would you talk a little bit about whether you think that theater does have a social responsibility, and are there plays that you have produced that you feel have trying to say something that we should all hear?
Well, does the theater have a social responsibility? That's I feel as a individual, an artistic leader, I have a social responsibility to an institution in New York City or wherever to represent the cultural landscape that that our audience is from. And so I feel a deep responsibility to constantly examine myself and what we are producing and to say, is this good enough? Are we challenging ourselves enough? Are we representing playwrights on every different level? Because I think for me, it's a deep personal responsibility to diversify our work in every single way. And sometimes we've been good at that, and sometimes we haven't. But I think so maybe the theater reflects to you the images of the leaders within it, like these guys, the voices within it that have taken up the baton to say they have something that is burning inside of them that they have to write about. And in many ways, that's what makes a good playwright, is that there's no other way to say it is for them, and they have that burning desire, and that social responsibility manifests in many different ways. So, but yes, I think, and remember, the core of theater is a social interaction. We come together to watch a play collectively. It's not something that we do, watching in our own room. So we need an audience to know how a play works. We need an audience to tell us what's happening and how people think.
So would you tell us a couple of plays that you were really proud that you produced and why.
Oh, I'm proud of every play that I've.
Every playwright is
I
thrilled
like,
to know
you
that.
It's like, yeah, this is not the Sophie's Choice of
No.
of producing. No, I mean, I'm. It's hard for me to say which because there are all so many and so many different ones. One currently we're doing David Ives' latest premiere. Called Lives of the Saints, and we've done almost 7 of his productions, and we're very proud of that relationship. Before that we did a premiere by Billy Porter, which was his first playwriting, real first major New York premiere, and that was a very challenging and exciting work as well. And then we've done people like, Denai Greer and Nicole Salter, who did In the Continuum, which is this play that I went to the South Bronx because my wife pulled me there to go see it, and it was done in a school, and I walked away from it saying we have to produce this play. And In the Continuum, we produced it, it transferred off Broadway. They performed it. It ended up going all across the world. We went to Zimbabwe, South Africa, London, Scotland. It was tremendous, and all across the United States.
Andrew, please tell us what the plot was of that play.
Well, In the Continuum, it's a socially driven play. It's about 2 women, one in Zimbabwe who contracts HIV, and one in Los Angeles who also contracts HIV, and how they deal with, and how society in those 2 worlds are similar and yet different, and how they deal with the social stigmas attached to that.
What is the current play that you have on, and
well,
the story?
Right now, we're doing Lives of the Saints by David Ives, and Lives of the Saints. If you're familiar with David Ives' work, he's written many full-length plays, but his earlier careers and what we've produced many of his plays have been the one-act form, and these are a collection of 8 one-acts and 7 one-acts, and so the overall theme is sainthood, shall we say, or what makes someone a saint, or that idea of being a saint. But they're all very different. Some of them are. He's also a very witty, intellectual playwright, and his writing is very sharp and timed. In fact, we did the premiere, and I'm sure you guys have heard of All in the Timing, which we produced the first production of, and All in the Timing has been produced all over the world and continues to be part of the repertoire of most drama programs as a stable for scene work. So, in fact, when we did the 20th anniversary production 2 years ago of it, we were amazed to see how many people were like, "I did this in college."
Before I ask each of the playwrights to tell us a play that they think has important resonance for all of us in the theater, Andrew, tell us how you choose the plays. How do you select a season? That must be very complicated. Or can you really tell us?
Well, I mean, it's always complicated because right now we only have a certain number of slots available to present shows in. I probably have about hundreds of plays that I would love to produce, and so you look at a season from many different levels. One, because we offer a subscription to our audiences, so you don't want to have 5 dramas in the season, and everybody's going to be like, "Well, that was a depressing year." So you want to have variety and spice in it, and what I like to think is I keep trying to shake it up a little bit so that people don't expect the same thing from us every time. So you're also looking at diversity. Since we're a playwrights theater, it's important for us to have playwrights from all walks of life, and to look at what that cultural diversity is in the season. And then there's also, economics. I love to do that 18 character drama with the, 5 sets but my managing director will say, well, how are we going to pay for that? So, you have to be creative and find creative solutions. In fact, this year we just announced some of our shows for next season. What I did was I went to see this show by Ike Holter called Exit Strategy, which is about the failing school systems in Chicago. And he did it with the Showcase Company in Chicago at the Jackalope. If any of you go to Chicago. And they did it in a gymnasium, and it was kind of amazing, and it got tremendous reviews. And I was a big fan of the play. But in order to figure out a way to produce the play, and also to give it more development time, which is something that a lot of playwrights, a lot of new plays need and benefit from, is to have multiple productions. I went out and I reached out to another theater company in Philadelphia, and I said, here's an interesting play that we've worked with. And so they read it, they were very excited about it. And then we began the process of collaborating on it together. So it'll start in Philly and then come into New York. And then you share resources. So, you find creative ways to, and we all have to be in these economic times, you have to think big and beyond just, how can we just do it the traditional way, and yet give it life, and do and achieve what you want to do. So that's another aspect.
Now I'm going to ask our panel to tell us the plays that they have thought about that they think have a significance for audiences and why. Yes, Brooklyn, it's yours.
Well, on the one hand, I am a little new to this form of art and theater in general, so I don't have a broad range of plays that I know off the top of my head. I grew up listening to some major musicals, and I think Leynse or Showboat, and that unfortunately to some degree is the extent of my knowledge about theater. But what I'm starting to see is that each play and production of an art form of any kind carries similar messages to a large degree, and each message, and because it's a creative work, is important to society because it's expressing a part of humanity and a part of who we are.
Lovely. Moving on.
Yeah, I didn't, like Brooklyn, I actually didn't really have a significant theater experience growing up. I don't come from a family that went to the theater a lot. And I read a lot of novels by, growing up I was interested in short stories and in long-form fiction. George Orwell and Toni Morrison and the short stories of June Jordan and Raymond Carver and people like this. But there were 3 writers who were writing around the same time, who were very significant in thinking about seminal writers and seminal plays that had resonance well after they were presented. And that is certainly Lorraine Hansberry and Adrienne Kennedy and Ntozake Shange. These 3 women were writing almost like contemporaneously. And Ntozake, her play, which you may have heard of, is one of her best-known plays is called For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. And this play, many people don't realize, actually last year celebrated its 40th anniversary. And this play, in fact, began almost an entirely new form of theater, this what some people sort of started calling slam poetry or poetic theater, or like this. It ushered in a brand new form that's still with us today. So, yeah, that's pretty powerful.
I can't name any place that you guys would know. So, for me, very powerful experience to know is that there are countries in the world, and very close to Finland too, that doing theater is dangerous for you, or to write about certain things is dangerous for you. For example, there was this Palestinian guy who formed a theater because he wanted to work with the kids that are suffering from the situation, and they have they're very traumatized about I call it a war, but you can call it whatever you want. And he was murdered because of what he did, and that kind of makes you feel like the country I'm living in, and now I'm living here, they feel safe. But I keep thinking, what would be the thing that would be dangerous to say in this country, or what would be dangerous to say in Finland? So that's kind of.
Do you find there's a big difference? You've been here 6 months, I think, right?
Yes, I don't think I know America quite well yet, but
Is there something that you feel is dangerous in Finland?
Well, we are next to Russia right now, so a lot of things are a bit shaky now.
I think it would be a mistake not to mention the work of the Tectonic Theater Project. Plays like Gross Indecency and the Laramie Project, which not only are really grab onto the imagination of what we do, but also very specifically from the words of people who said the things, the historical background, which just to bring it kind of full circle, has its roots in Georg Büchner and Wojciech doing that historical sort of playwriting technique.
Got a lot of plays that run through my head in the last 30 seconds, but I think the one I'm going to choose in this moment is Journey's End by R.C. Sheriff, who is not that well known as a playwright today because he went on to have a much more lucrative career as a screenwriter. But Journey's End is a play that was written in 1928, about 10 years after the end of World War I. And Journey's End is about a group of British soldiers living in a dugout over the course of a couple days before they're all killed at the very end of the play. And it's an anti-war play, and it's about the folly of that particular conflict, but it has a kind of a universal appeal to it. For a variety of reasons.
Kathleen, I don't know this is a segue into it, but you were trying to tell me this, or telling this morning about a group that is coming next year to perform at the public.
Exactly who Paula was talking about.
Would you mention that? Talk about
yes,
them?
it's called the Jenin Freedom Theater, and the person who founded it was an Arab-Israeli actor named Giuliano Merchamis.
The wife was Finnish.
Yes, his wife was Finnish. And no one, it's an interesting, I'm on the board of this theater company. It's a theater company in the Jenin refugee camp. And it's interesting about how dangerous art is because it's not entirely clear who killed Giuliano. A lot of people could have killed Giuliano, because Giuliano was subversive in all possible ways. It was important to him. His idea was using art as resistance, and the purpose of the theater is art as resistance to using art as resistance to the occupation, and it does it in a number of ways. But Giuliano, because his mother was Israeli and his father was Palestinian, was a liminal character and in some way distrusted by everyone on both sides. Giuliano, who was did you ever meet Giuliano?
No, I saw the documentary
of Called Arna's Children, which is a wonderful movie. But Giuliano was a very sexy guy. Was a very successful actor in Israel, a kind of matinee idol before he went back to Jenin. But one of the things that was important for him in the theater was he was a great feminist. And it was an issue in the camp, not for everybody, but there was a strong, quite conservative faction that was distressed by women and men working together and women on the stage. And it was a big part of Giuliano's work. The first big production they did was Animal Farm, which caused a lot of distress all the way around. And the second one was Alice in Wonder, this wild, fierce, deeply subversive and very upsetting version of Alice in Wonderland. So yes, Giuliano is an example of what happens when art is dangerous. And I think Lynn was talking about a place where art can be dangerous. It talks a little bit about the power of it.
Would each one of you tell us what play you've written for our 10-minute play festival? And then, if you would like, tell us something else you may wish you could write about. Not a 10-minute play, but something else. Brooklyn, do you want to start?
My play this year is called Observant, and it is comedy and irony. It takes place in a coffee shop, and this policeman is on break, and he's trying to make the point to a younger woman that nobody takes the time to notice things anymore. They're moving too fast. They're too sucked up in technology. Meanwhile, there's a crime happening, and she's trying to get his attention so that he can do his job with the crime.
Oh, wow, that was loud. Huh. My play is called Nordic Ambition, Self-Portrait No. 3, and last year I embarked on writing a series of self-portraits, and it's sort of draws from obviously myself, experiential as an experiential quality, but it's a lot about memory and a lot about failure and spectatorship. Thinking a lot about last summer, particularly as we were watching violent images of biased crimes as they were happening to men of color across this country. And in the theater, I often think a lot about the spectator, and I think they're sort of the key to a lot of what we do. So yeah, that's what my play is. Yeah.
Oh no. My play is called English Lesson. There are 3 characters. There's a mother who's teaching her son English. They have just moved to this country. And then there's an old lady with Alzheimer's who has something to tell them. But every time she makes the journey to tell what she has to say, she forgets what she was about to say. Well, I guess for me it's about levels of communicating, but aren't all plays about that? And compassion, and I'm very interested in do we ever remember or learn anything, I guess? Well, that sort of things.
My play is called Off Tackle Glide, and it is based on the true story of a college football player named Adam Muama, who went to the football combine in college and was sort of wrestling with whether he was more interested in sort of the religious path or the path of athletic fame. So that's pretty much what that play is about, and him struggling with those choices. As far as plays for the future, I have actually I'm working on right now a play about a woman named Julia Sand, who inspired the 21st president, Chester Arthur, after Garfield was assassinated, to reform. And that's all I'll say about that.
My play is called Laodamiad, and it takes its inspiration from 5 surviving lines of a Euripides play that we don't have anymore, called Protesilaus. and it's the story of the first war widow of the Trojan War, who is, as a gift from the gods, is given a kind of a very brief reunion with her dead husband, and kind of loses it after that, and carries on her marriage with a statue in his likeness. And it's, well, about grief. And it's sort of, I guess it's sort of like Weekend at Bernie's, but Greek. Yeah. And I'm working on a musical right now about a pirate captain who was kind of a 18th century Robin Hood, proto-Marxist, democratic, anarcho-syndicalist at sea, who also put on plays on his ship. And the most famous of one was called The Royal Pirate, and it ended in bloodshed because the pirates thought it was actually happening, so they attacked the actors.
Will each one of you just give us a moment of what you think you see happening in today's theater and how you think your work will be seen? Does that mean that you're going to be also writing for television or for film? Where do you want to see your work produced, and what do you see as that step towards it? What kind of work do you want to write, and where will it be done? Go ahead, Brooklyn.
Let's see. Well, I hope I can remember all the parts to your question this time.
Any part will do. Any part will do.
So your question. Now I've forgotten. Okay. All right.
Where do you want your work produced? What kind of work?
Well, I'm personally more comfortable writing fiction and novels. Oh, okay. Now
You've got it.
Now I remember. Okay. Your question was what sort of how does my play fit in with theater that and the little bit that I've been exposed to in recent years. And I feel like with all the darkness that and problems, there's a lot in this world, and it's becoming easier and easier. Not easier, but it's almost easy to default to that. And I feel like more and more that's what people are dealing with, and rightly so. But I try to bring a little splash of comedy, and because I think there's value in that too, and I think it's harder for comedy to get appreciated as having depth next to things that are darker and dealing with bigger problems. And so I'm trying to come to terms with that for myself, and it's interesting to throw that out there.
So do you write other things, Philip, and where would you like to see your work performed?
Broadway. Yeah. Well, yeah. Which is to say there are not enough interesting, smart, funny, what did you say? You said, Kathleen, like non-musical plays on Broadway?
Actually, straight plays, which is a complicated word. So, yes, non-musical plays.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of want them to be done by anyone who would like to do them, who feels that they're interested in, the form of the play, because my plays are a little bit strange, who are curious about the characters who I'm presenting. The characters who I write are often individuals we don't see a lot on our American stages, or not often enough. So theaters and community centers, gymnasiums, churches, or places of worship that are interested in those types of stories. But also, I want to say that I just hope that I have I think we all hope that we have a career, that we're able to do this for the long term, because that's also a little bit, in jeopardy now. Or
I have no idea how to write for a TV, or I don't know how to write a screenplay, and I've never been interested in it. I think I come from the songwriting side, so I'm into poetry, and then if you think about a song, it's like from 3 to maybe 8 minutes, and there's a small world in every song. So I don't know what's going to happen. I just still find myself not interested at all in the movie.
Just to let you know, yesterday, a video, a history of her phenomenal career as a rock star in Finland was aired in Helsinki. And I said to her, you have 7, was it, or 9 Grammys of a Helsinki type Grammy, right, for her work. And now she's decided to turn her storytelling that were in her songs into theater. So we're very lucky that you're here.
But it's a difficult road, because in music you take people to some moods that you have no words for with just listening. So it's gonna be a difficult road, but I'm into it.
We're glad you are.
I'll answer your question kind of from the beginning. The first panel, you asked a great question about the where things come from, or where you came from as a writer, and I think I began there when I was a child and had this huge imagination, and I didn't know what to do with it, so I would run around the playground and create things. And it wasn't until I found the theater that I realized that you could do that, and people would watch that and feel things, which is great, And I think I was diverted. I wrote a lot when I was younger, and I was diverted to be an actor because the immediacy of the reaction is palpable. You can see it, you can taste it, you can hear it at the end when people applaud. It's amazing. And so my writing was kind of tamped down, and it wasn't until later on that it came about again. And what I really realized, the core of everything that I'm interested in, I would love to be on Broadway, just for the record, but the core is inspiration to me. If one person, for even one moment of one of my plays, can be inspired, or can have that inspire them to think a thought that what they would never have thought before, then I feel like I've won. And that's my goal.
So several. Okay, so I write fiction too, and have written sort of screenplay type things, but haven't filmed any of them. I guess, I would love Broadway someday. I don't know that I've written a play that sort of would fit a Broadway theater yet. I kind of think that not all plays sort of belong in the same house, and I co-wrote a musical a few years ago called Cyclops, and it we all always kept saying that we would love it to play bigger and bigger and bigger houses, but ironically the best shows we had were in these pits of despair. They were like these gross, dirty garages essentially. So I say Broadway, but I'd be happy in a parking lot too. So.
Before I open this up to questions, which I look forward to having, I want to thank the Aspen Institute for asking us to partner with them again. I want to thank all the people in this community who house, who help theater masters, who perform, who act, and all the people that make the productions possible of Take 10, and to tell you how brilliant I think our school systems are here to turn out the high school students who hold their own so brilliantly with our graduate students, and how wonderful this event is. And in closing, of course, to say how lucky we are to have Kathleen Chalfant and to have Andrew Leynse. So thank you all very much. And now I'll turn it over for questions. Thank you.
This question is for Paula. I was curious if theater ever affected your own songwriting, and vice versa. How is your songwriting affecting the plays that you write now?
They have. I went to the theater a lot before I started studying playwriting in Finland. And when I was stuck with a song, I would go to see a play and then continue writing. So they were leaking a lot to each other. And I'm not doing music now. I'm just writing because it's foreign language for me, and a new country and everything's different. So it's a big adventure. I've never been outside LA. I moved there in August, so this is a huge experience.
I have an observation for the both panels about the sense of depression I get about the ability to go to Broadway, given the intellectual wasteland that it is now, that Kathleen has described. And that is this, that I think the regional theaters are doing a splendid job of providing opportunities for both actors and playwrights around the country. And in particular, I've spent some time in Portland, Oregon, where there's just an extremely active theater culture. And it's the openness of the Portland theater goers to contemporary plays, new plays, is also remarkable. And what also comes to mind is Ashland, my experiences in Ashland when I've gone there to the Shakespeare Festival, where there's always a third or a fourth of the plays, or a third or half of the plays are contemporary plays, or very recently written.
That is increasing. That we'll have more and more and more.
And
plans.
Superb acting. I mean, equity is well represented there. But anyway, I would be curious to know, I can see that in the future, the competition from television and even comic books is going to reduce the ability of legitimate theater to survive. But I think that may be just a phenomenon of Broadway, where the prices are very high, the costs are very high, and the intellectual wasteland is at play. And I think that the future of the legitimate theater may be away from Broadway, away from that type of experience. I have to.
Oddly, this Broadway is booming.
Yes,
it's
intellectually not.
Not intellectually, but interestingly as a form, which is an argument for the experience of live performance, even so that's a sort of bright spot in an otherwise complicated and paradoxical situation. But it's been more people have gone to the Broadway theater, and it's easy to say that they've made more money because they've raised the ticket prices, but there have been more theater goers. There were more theater goers this season than in any time in the history of the theater. So interesting to sort out what that means, actually.
Well, I'm curious about what the panel feels about the relative merit of aiming for Broadway or aiming for the regional theaters. And a disclaimer: my younger sister is a playwright actor, born in 1945, and on the stage constantly.
Well, the difficulty. I mean, the issue, the reason that anybody wants to go to Broadway is so that you can make a living as a playwright. Because in the regional theaters and in the not-for-profit theater, you simply can't make a living having a life in the theater as a playwright or a designer or an actor. You have to move into some other medium to make a living. So and the other thing is that it's a mass audience, so that for our experience, for instance, with Angels in America, the wonderful thing about going to Broadway, if you get there with something that you're proud of, is that you're going to see an audience that isn't a self-selecting group. It's a kind of broader platform. So people keep fighting that fight.
What I think we're running out of time, though, Julie. So you should.
We hate to lose you. Okay, we'll take 2 questions and then we must wrap it up.
Just very quickly, have any of you done this? If not, have any interest in it? What are the pros and cons of producing your own play?
All of them.
I have done it, and I have a theater company in New York, and it's just really expensive. And fundraising is really hard, especially when you're doing it. You're mainly just asking your friends and your family. And I find that as great as sort of crowdfunding type places are, you do sort of hit a critical mass, and you run out of people to ask money for.
They're also part-time, but one of the things that's very appealing about LA is the equity waiver theaters, which kind of can bring down the cost a bit. And it's really the only city that does that that I'm aware of. So it's really, that's interesting.
I actually started the company in LA, and I agree. It was really easy to produce, but you know, things do add up. Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes a volunteer profession. The fact is that the people who give the largest subsidy to the arts, certainly in the theater, and I suspect in all art forms, are the artists themselves. Because if people were compensated at the rate that people are compensated, you know, just ordinary compensation, the size of the subsidy is staggering, actually.
I would agree with that, but I also think that there are artists that have found ways to, like for example, Charles Bush, who I don't know how many people know Charles Bush here. Raise your hands. All right. But I mean, here's an artist who has exclusively written and defined and performed his own work, and sort of created his career off of that. So there are ways. There's always a way. With some will.
Last question, Nina.
If you were perhaps traveling to New York next week, is there any show that you would highly recommend one see?
Well, I don't know how
Either
you all
on
feel.
or off Broadway.
I think The Curious Into the Dog is a remarkable production. I think if you've ever read the book, to think that they could actually make it work on stage is what astounds me. I've not seen it in New York. I've only seen it in London. But I look forward to seeing it again. I don't know if someone else might say something there. Of course, I would go to Andrew's Theater without any question. But there must be other things that...
There's a great play downtown at the Soho Rep called Winners and Losers. If you get a chance to see that, it's fantastic. I want to just really quickly answer this question about Broadway, which is that I feel like oftentimes we dwell on the prohibition of things in the theater, and of course it's prohibitive. It's the finances and all of these things make it prohibitive to do it but we're still here anyway doing it, you know. And I used to work in human rights field, and so I know that the power of possible infiltration, like from within, is like can be staggering. And so like I hope that that we all have the opportunity to be there, and I sort of fly on that hope, as opposed to dwelling on the prohibition, So.
I'm going to wrap this up